well, the Prime Minister is preparing to announce a new cost of living package. The government trying to balance relief measures, but not fuel inflation. There was a hint from the Prime Minister earlier this month that there could be something announced sooner rather than later. And perhaps, according to reports today, changes coming to the biggest policy of all. Live to Political Correspondent Olivia Caisley. So, Olivia, federal MPs have been called to this urgent meeting in Canberra. There was a bit of discussion around why so urgent. Well, could there be a change to the stage 3 tax cuts?
Well, that remains to be seen, Tom. So the Prime Minister, we know that he's tasked Treasury with coming up with ways that the government could deliver further cost of living relief, but in a way that doesn't put upward pressure on inflation. It's obviously a very difficult challenge and it is going to require a nifty solution. Ultimately, once Treasury formulates that advice, that's going to go to Cabinet Ministers at a meeting tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, all Labor MPs are going to have an opportunity to weigh in on potential cost of living relief at this special meeting here in Canberra. But ultimately, this does involve bringing Labor MPs back to Canberra a little earlier, 2 weeks earlier than expected, because the Parliament sitting year doesn't really kick off for another 2 weeks. The cost of this is already drawing the ire of the opposition.
It's about $500,000 to bring the Labor caucus to Canberra, the airfares and overnight what's called travel allowance for people staying overnight on Wednesday night. The main reason for that seems to be so they can go to a party. So Australians, I think, would reasonably have some questions about the cost of this exercise.
Well, that's nonsense, of course. Ministers are here already this week. We were here last week. People will be here for the Australia Day pre-Australia Day address. I'm doing it at the National Press Club as well on Thursday, and then we have the national commemorations.
And it could well be the government just floating the balloon on this so far, Tom, but there are reports this afternoon that Cabinet Ministers could also be presented with possible tweaks to the Stage 3 tax cut policy. This is a pretty contentious policy that the government's committed to in full. They're due to come into play in the middle of this year. There are concerns, though, that this policy will add to inflationary pressures. The Prime Minister thus far, though, has been pretty adamant that there are no changes in the pipeline. Have a listen.
Can you confirm, just regarding tax cuts, can you confirm tax cuts as legislated will come into effect on July 1st?
I can confirm that we haven't changed our position.
So the reports are suggesting that the tax-free threshold would be increased while the top marginal rate would remain at $180,000. So they're yet unconfirmed. I have contacted the Prime Minister's office on this, but I'm yet to receive a response. That hasn't stopped National Senator Perrin Davey weighing in, though. She says even a tweak to this policy would constitute a broken election promise.
Stage 3 tax cuts were very specifically for between 45,000 to 200,000 income earners. So, we would need to see the detail. We would absolutely need to see the detail, but it is a backflip on the election commitment that the Prime Minister made to the people.
So interesting to note the response there from Perrin Davey. Need to see the detail, and look, that's fair enough. But, when a question is sprung on you like that from a story that's just getting out there, but talking about broken promise, it clearly would be. The government, the Labor government, didn't say they were going to do this, but perhaps they'd say in these economic times they'd win the fairness argument, Liv. So that'll be weighed up, I guess, not just by Cabinet, but plenty of backbenchers have a pretty strong view on this as well.
That's exactly right. And I'm sure that those in voterland will be interested to see what comes out of these meetings this week.
So we'll get that. It's all going to play out. It promises to be a fascinating week ahead of the PM's address on January 25. The PM also touching on international affairs. Ukraine has upped its appeal for an urgent, what it calls humanitarian shipment of Australian thermal coal. What have we heard today in terms of reaction to that?
Yeah, well, ultimately, Ukraine is asking again for further military assistance, and there have been some criticism of the government because there have been some rejections already. So if you look at this graphic here, the Albanese government's already batted away requests for RAF fighter jets, also those Taipan helicopters that are going out of action, and also Hawkeye combat vehicles that did have that brake issue, and therefore they're going out of action for the Australian Army, but Ukraine did want access to them. They're now asking the government to match a similar shipment of around 80,000 tonnes of coal. We did send that in August 2022 at a cost of around 30 million, and they'd like the same again. They say it's essential for their war effort as Russia ramps up its attacks and ultimately that they need it to keep the lights on. The Prime Minister still appears to be weighing up that request.
I think it's still being under consideration. We still haven't received an official reply to that request. I believe that would be the right thing to do, and Australia has plenty of coal in that matter.
One of the biggest exporters in the world. So is that why you ask Australia specifically?
Yes, and it also that's one of the reasons.
Are we not as committed as we used to?
Well, Tom, I'm proud to say that Australia has been one of the most significant non-NATO contributors to Ukraine. You know, we want to see the conflict between Ukraine and Russia ended on the terms of the Ukrainian government.
So we'll wait and see if there are any further tweaks to the Stage 3 tax cut policy, or when it comes to this potential cost of living relief. We can or are hoping to get the full details of that when the Prime Minister addresses the National Press Club on Thursday. Tom?
Olivia Caisley, thank you.